Hey everyone, it's James from Rebranding Safety. Today we're going to talk all about SSIP accreditations. Let's get into the intro. What's up peeps, James from Rebranding Safety. Rebranding Safety is brought to you by Fluent Consulting. They're your health and safety partner for any business out there looking for some support that's practical, reasonable, and Risk Assessor Pro, which is your one-stop shop for doing quick and high quality RAMs, incident reporting and checklists. So check them both out, websites in the description below. So let's talk about SSIP accreditation. Let's get into everything. By the end of this video, hopefully you're going to understand what an SSIP is, how to choose the right one for you, and the value that they bring to the market. So let's start off with what is SSIP. SSIP stands for Safety Schemes in Procurement. In itself, it's not an assessment scheme, rather it's an umbrella of organisations. It's actually an accreditation for several bodies to assess against. And essentially it's all about mutual recognition. When a contractor is assessed via a registered SSIP provider, they will then submit a series of documentation that will then be assessed against the core criteria, which we'll go through later. And then what that becomes is a mutually recognised standard that all bodies then agree to say, we're happy with that. The aim of that is to reduce duplication, streamline process, make us efficient and reduce costs as well. In reality, however, it doesn't quite work like that. We're going to come on to the reality in a moment. But let's stay positive for the moment. Continue on the track of what this should be. So why do we need SSIP? Well, organisations, contractors, suppliers, they often, or they at least used to, often face multiple pre-qualification questionnaires, PQQ forms, audits from clients, constantly uploading the same documentation over and over and over again to all of your clients from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to hundreds of clients, and you're submitting the same thing over and over again. So what SSIP did was come up with a core criteria. That core criteria is what all of these clients were assessing against and what they wanted to know before they approved a contractor to work on site. And this would assess their competencies, their safety and so on. This was then agreed and then it was set as the core criteria within SSIP, which is really important. Now for buyers and procurers, they can go into SSIP system that they have chosen and then they would have their contractors issue that certificate. And then off you go. So how does that work? Well, here's a simplified kind of flow chart, if you will. So an organisation, they choose a member scheme, right? A provider. So these might be something like CHAS, for example, CHAS. That scheme then conducts an assessment, typically desk-based. You would upload, the contractor would upload all the required information into their portal. They would assess that against the SSIP core criteria. Then from there, you're approved or you're given feedback. And then once you've given that feedback, you would adjust to that. So once you're satisfactory, the scheme issues a certificate and the entry is published or verified in that customer or that provider's portal. The SSIP other member schemes will then use something called a deem to satisfy. So if I'm applying for CHAS, for example, and I get assessed against CHAS, but one of my customers would prefer it to be SafeContractor, I would get a deem to satisfy where SafeContractor have said, yes, I can see they've got a CHAS certificate, therefore I'm happy with that. Then that certificate, either CHAS or the deem to satisfy from somebody else, would be issued to my customer and I'm off. I've been accepted. All that procurement, that due diligence is done. As a simplified idea, SSIP is phenomenal. It's so impressive. Or SSIP as an organisation, as the top umbrella organisation, promote a proportionate based approach, looking at size and risk. Now let's think about some of the benefits and limitations. Looking at some industry commentary, and then I'm going to add my own commentary, right? The benefits 100% are efficiency and cost saving, right? With fewer repeated assessments, we're lowering that admin burden, which particularly for SMEs is massive, right? Huge benefit there. Another one, consistency. Enforcing that core criteria across multiple schemes, multiple organisations is great. We get consistent approaches across the board. I'm a big fan of that as well. It provides the buyer, the customer, a lot of confidence, right? It gives us that certificate, I can have some confidence, and it reduces the admin burden on them as well. So we're having multiple layers of admin reduction. So that's phenomenal. Here are some limitations, some challenges that we have. SSIP typically only covers a baseline health and safety demonstration. It does not replace kind of site-specific validations, method statements, compliance audits, and so on. So what does that mean? What that means is it's only assessing the organisation as a collective, that they have some systems in place to manage health and safety. It's not looking at the job-specific RAMs, risk assessments, and method statements. It's not understanding or assessing how we're managing this specific job. So there is still a requirement on the client and the contractor to consider the job that we are specifically working on. The quality of the assessment does depend on how rigorously the member scheme enforces the core criteria and audits its assessors. There is an added layer of complexity to that. A lot of these providers will subcontract out the assessments, and the consistency of those doing the assessments it varies hugely. You can have some that are experienced, competent health and safety professionals that are really good at applying the core criteria and being reasonable and proportionate, which is what SSIP as an organisation wanted us to be. Then you can also get entry-level people that are essentially just following a tick box, and they really struggle to understand. The nature of SSIP of late has become very commercial. So each of these providers need to find a way to stand out. They don't, the idea of SSIP doesn't make sense in a commercial world, right? We're all assessing off the core criteria, right? So why would I go to CHAS or SafeContractor? Basically, it's just price, right? So we end up getting a race to the bottom. Well, that's not what most people want, particularly in safety. So what now happened is all of these SSIP member schemes are doing extra. So they're going to the client, their client, which is your client. You as a contractor are not SSIP's member scheme client. The client is your client, right? The customer that's ordering you to do some work. So they're going to your client and they're saying, contractors on our scheme are safer than contractors on their scheme because we ask extra questions. Now that adds an extra layer of complication, because if one member scheme is asking more questions than the other member scheme, they won't accept that as a deemed to satisfy. So they'll do the deemed to satisfy, but they'll ask additional questions. It's now becoming the opposite of what it should have been. It's not reducing admin, and it's becoming a little bit Scouts for safety, I call it, where you see the van with badge and badge and badge and badge and badge, and a lot of these small businesses have to have all of these badges, and it's quite exhausting. It's very costly for some of these small businesses because they have to have CHAS, SafeContractor, blah 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 blah, and unfortunately has not achieved the outcome that I believe SSIP was trying to achieve. There is a massive risk, and I would say it's gone beyond the risk now, and it is an actual presentable issue in that it's become very checkbox compliance. So people are issuing documents that are just generic, they mean nothing, it demonstrates nothing, and they think they're safe because they have all of these badges. We must be safe because we have all of these badges, when unfortunately they're not, because those documents would not stand up the test of time in court. So what type of schemes are there, or what are the example schemes out there, and what are my experiences with those ones? So CHAS has become a little bit known, and if this is unfair to CHAS, then I apologise, but the reputation on the market is it's cheaper and quicker. SMAS works safe, kind of middle of the road. Again, I don't really get a vibe from them of promoting themselves as being safer than anyone else. The portal itself is not too bad. The CHAS portal itself is not too bad either. As you were going to put maybe like the quicker and easier ones, I'd probably say CHAS and SMAS are in there. SafeContractor or Alchemist SafeContractor, as well as Acclaim Constructionline, I would say pitch themselves as the middle of the road. They do ask extra questions. They also do extra things. I believe CHAS does as well. I'm not sure about SMAS, where they'll look at modern slavery, quality, environment. They look at much more things than just health and safety. Again, they're trying to become more commercially viable and commercially attractive. And for the bigger customers, that is more attractive. I would say in our experiences, big customers, big companies are attracted more to SafeContractor and Constructionline. They are 100% the most attractive ones out in the market. You're probably going to capture all if you're on one of these. The portal, or at least the assessment, the experience with SafeContractor and Constructionline online, we find quite frustrating, a bit clunky. We've had multiple arguments with SafeContractor assessors. We have found them to be very, very picky, very unproportionate to risk and complexity. Constructionline, probably not as bad, but equally, we have had some challenges with them. Now, Achilles pride themselves on being the top. They pride themselves on being the closest to ISO 45001 you could probably get without being ISO 45001. I wouldn't say they're the only one to come out to site. I know some of the others do in particular cases, but they will come out to site and they will audit you. I'm not overly against that at all. They're not as popular from my experience. The two most popular ones are by far SafeContractor and Constructionline. One last thing to cover is the core criteria. What is the core criteria? What are you going to be assessed on, right? So these are the core criteria that all of them will have to assess against on SSIP, but they will ask more questions, particularly in modern slavery, quality, any of these other topics. They will go beyond this, and particularly those ones like SafeContractor, Constructionline, they will ask more because, again, that's how they stand out to their clients. And remember, their clients are your customers, right? The people you are trying to work with if you are a contractor or an SME. So what is the criterion, right? Policy and organization, right? The existence of documented health and safety policy and allocation of responsibilities. So there is a complication in policies, and that probably deserves a video in its own right. We have the health and safety statement of intent, which is a one-pager that says we intend to do X, Y, Z, signed by the boss. Then you have policies for every single risk topic that you could ever interact with. That's typically what your accrediting body is going to want to see, the big one, the one that's covering everything. And they're going to want to see an allocation of roles and responsibilities for all of that as well. So you need to be able to say how you're managing each risk, who is doing it and what they're doing. Evidence of that is going to be a big health and safety document with signatures, with roles and responsibilities. Then they're going to look at planning and hazard identification. So they're going to be looking at risk assessments, method statements. How are you going through that process of hazard identification? They're going to want to see RAMs from the job. Now, an interesting point here, nearly all of the portals we come across, you input your industry, they will tell you what RAMs they want to see. This can present several challenges. If you put, I work in this industry or I do this type of work, but you only do it every once in a blue moon, they're going to want to see RAMs for it. So don't put it unless you are doing it. Additionally, you may have to go back to them and fight sometimes when they say, our system says if you're a painter and decorator, you do this, but you don't actually do that. You might need to go back and argue that with them. That can get a little bit chunky. Legal compliance. They're going to want to see legal registers and at least an awareness of the application of legislation. You can tend to tick this bit off in your policies if you do good policies, but they are going to want to see you auditing against that, right? So they're going to want to see site audits or organizational audits that show that you are demonstrating legal compliance. Competence, training and awareness. This can be a hard thing to manage for some organisation. They want the awareness, they want to show, or they want to see, that you are managing competence and awareness of the hazards and things you're interacting with for the job. They're also going to want to see task or trade-based training as well, which can be challenging for some industries that don't really have certificated routes of entry, if that makes sense. But they're going to want to see training records, competency matrix, and they're going to want to see induction records. They're going to want to see toolbox talks to show you're maintaining all of that stuff as well. They're also going to look at resource procedures and documentation. So they want to see operational procedures, emergency planning and the like. So procedure manuals, emergency plans, drills, things like that. Good way to do this: include emergency plans in your method statements for your site specific jobs. You can tick two birds with one stone. Monitoring, auditing and annual review. They're going to want to see internal audits, like I've just said, in legal. They're going to want to see it for the organisation as well. Depends on the level. Sometimes some will accept a site audit. Some will want a site audit and an organisational audit. It does vary. There's huge inconsistencies sometimes in what is acceptable and what isn't. But they're going to want to see inspection logs. They're going to want to see like calibrations, things like that. We're checking our vans. We're checking our tools. We're keeping an eye on stuff like that. We've got KPIs, accident data, and so on. Incident and non-conformity, just mentioned it on the last one, but they want to see a reporting incidents, you're investigating incidents, you're managing corrective actions. So incident registers, root cause investigations, whatever you want to call it, they will want to see that stuff as well. Communication and consultation, worker engagement, toolbox talks, feedback loops, signatures. They are mad for signatures. They want to see signed toolbox talks, signed training sheets, signed RAMs, signed meeting minutes, right? If you can get all of those, you've ticked this off quite well. But you will need your teams to be signing off your RAMs. You will need to be doing regular meetings, and you will need to send those minutes to these accreditation bodies. Contractor and supplier management, oversights of subcontractors. They're going to want to see that you are doing your own due diligence if you are subcontracting a job out. So if you are subcontracting to another business that's coming in doing one bit of the job, then you're going to want to see due diligence. You're checking their RAMs, you've got contractual agreements, you're inducting them into the business, and so on. Emergency preparedness. They want to see emergency plans, drills, first aid, fire procedures. Again, you can smash all of this in a good set of RAMs. You have the emergency planning in your method statements for your site-specific jobs, or if you're doing CDM kind of CPPs, that will force you to have that in there as well. You could use that as evidence. If relevant, there will be a specific CDM section. So if you fall into the category, or you have ticked the box to say, yes, we do CDM work, sometimes you don't have a choice, it comes up and they argue with you anyway. But where applicable, you're going to want to show principal designer, principal contractor duties, understanding how you're managing that. A CDM policy would work quite well if it does apply. Then they're going to want to see health and safety files or construction phase plans, designer risk assessments. Depending on what type of role you fall into, you need to evidence that you are following CDM. And then finally, insurance. They're going to want to see valid insurance certificates, third-party verification. And finally, my advice, what to do with SSIP. You don't have a choice. You're going to need it. I feel like I'm on the news. Today on Snooze. If you're a contractor working in the UK and you want to work with big businesses, you're going to want one of these. So pick one that you know the client you're trying to work with does it. And then don't get any more until another client says, we want a different one. And then make sure that reflects reality. Don't rest on your laurels and think that because I've got documentation, I won't go to jail or I won't get a fine. The documentation's got to work. If it works, then you're doing a good job. If you need any help from us, riskfluentltd.com or riskassessor.net. I hope you got something out of this video. I'll catch you in the next one. Safe.